So, we can conclude that language is an autonomous function of the brain, separate from intelligence, and that we humans are biologically wired to acquire language. In fact, new research has uncovered the very gene whose job it is to open and close a critical window of time during which first language acquisition occurs. This is called the FOXP2 gene, and it sits on chromosome number 7. I think there's even more recent research on exactly what part of the gene and what it does, and it's fascinating. Quote, if a child is not exposed to a lot of spoken language during that critical period, he or she will always struggle with speech. This is what I'm quoting from an article from Time magazine, June 2nd of 2003. It's a good quote because it says exactly what I'm talking about, the critical period. Also, as we've seen, damage to the brain, particularly in the Broca's and or Wernicke's areas, which we know to be associated with language, disrupts normal language development during initial acquisition, or in the case of brain damage to an older child or adult, destroys all or part of former language ability. Interestingly, it appears that all animals have critical periods for learning specific life skills. Baby birds for learning songs, ducklings for learning to swim, as well as children for learning their native language, their first language. Those famous and often horrific cases of children deprived of normal language input during the critical period demonstrate what happens in such circumstances. Although they may have been given intense language therapy later on, people who didn't receive the normal language input at the right time in their development within that critical period during childhood were unable to master the complex grammar of normal language. But they could learn some vocabulary and string some words together, but were never able to gain full command of natural language. What had happened in these cases? Had the language acquirer in the brain disappeared or dried up or atrophied? Is that biologically determined window of opportunity, which we call the critical period, during which the brain is prepared to develop language, is that our only chance to acquire the complex abstract grammar and characteristics of natural language? Well, apparently so. Since it is extremely rare to find a person who has acquired a language to the level of complete native speaker proficiency after the critical period has passed. Let me qualify that a little bit before the end here. We now know that adults continue to, even though we age, we continue to give birth to new neurons, brain cells, and that even though the critical period has passed, that adults are able to acquire language even later in life, and it's a very good exercise for the brain to stave off some of the aging, perhaps. But acquiring a language naturally the way a child does is not the way it happens for an adult, so that's really the difference.